we've got two other candidates joining us. At 7:30, Penny Mordaunt will be here. But first up, it is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Nadhim Zahawi. Nadhim, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Quite an interesting week that everyone's had, particularly you appointed to be Chancellor. Now, just take me through, before we go on to the reasons that you're standing, take me through what happened in that 48-hour period, because Boris Johnson appointed you Chancellor. And then if all the reports are to be believed, within 24 hours, you were telling him that he had to go, which a lot of people, shall we say, raised more than an eyebrow at.
Well, on the Tuesday night, the Prime Minister called me in and said, I'd like you to become my Chancellor. I think your energy, what you brought to the vaccine programme and then to education and your background in business would mean that we can really deliver a coherent economic strategy. We would work towards a speech this week, probably Thursday, to deliver that strategy to the nation as to what we're going to do to help them with the cost of living.
And that was going to include a VAT cut, I read.
We were going to look at many things, a number of things. And of course, that speech didn't happen because on Wednesday morning, I did the media round, the morning round, of course, very much laying out what I proposed to do in the work in the Treasury in terms of making sure we rebuild the economy and then inject growth into the economy. And I said I would return to the Treasury, work with my leadership team, a brilliant team, to get that strategy together for this week. By the afternoon of Wednesday, late afternoon, it became obvious to me that so many ministers had resigned. It was becoming now impossible to form a functioning government, and I decided to go to Number 10 and meet with the Prime Minister, a friend who I've known for 30 years, and to say to him that I think it's going to be impossible for us to continue as a functioning government, and I felt it was right and my responsibility to say to my friend that he needs to think about his position and decide on that and control that situation rather than have it transcend into chaos.
But at no point did you yourself offer your resignation?
No, I wanted to try and make sure that we deliver that economic strategy. I've always put country before party, before everything else, in everything I've done, whether it was the Children and Families Minister, the Business Minister in the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. I delivered remember the ventilator challenge. So we needed 30,000 ventilators to be delivered with the great engineer called Dick Elsey from the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, a great man who will always be recognised for that. And then, of course, the vaccine deployment and then education. Remember, skills, schools, families. I came, I think, on your show to discuss that focus on skills and schools and families and of course the privilege to serve as Chancellor to try and steward the economy through these turbulent waters. We are facing a huge economic challenge. I would say it's an economic national emergency at the moment, which is why I took on the role. But it became obvious to me by about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon that this was going to be impossible, which is why I sat with the PM and discussed this face to face. I didn't hide away and write to him on this. But he said, look, let me try. Go back to the Treasury, keep working on the strategy. Let's try and deliver it next week. And I did. But by the next morning, it was becoming impossible. So I felt I had to write the letter to him, just reminding him of our conversation the night before and then just asking him to do the right thing for the sake of the nation, which he did.
But you did that very publicly. And a lot of people thought, well, if you're doing that publicly, surely you should do what others have done and offer your own resignation. Why didn't you do that?
Because I felt that the stewardship of the economy has to be uppermost in my priority list. If you talk to anybody who has been in government, including our most senior, brilliant civil service, they will tell you the one role that they need for governance, for good governance and stewardship is Chancellor. And for me to destabilise the Treasury and, of course, be irresponsible in that way was just unacceptable.
So you're calling Rishi Sunak irresponsible?
No, I'm just saying to you that's how I felt. That is a decision I made. People will make up their own mind about that. I do think we need to come together after this leadership election. I mean, what is making me incredibly proud is you only have to look at, I think it was up on your screen, those 8 hugely talented individuals, Rishi Sunak, of course, Kemi Badenoch, Penny Mordaunt. I'm not going to go all through the names, but it's wonderful, right? The diversity of the quality of leadership in my party.
It is a diverse group.
Is wonderful.
Of course, most of the 8, I mean, I think there are 3 that could say, well, I would be a completely new broom because I've never been in the cabinet or I haven't even been in the government. You have. Now, you've been a minister for quite a long time. You're certainly a minister throughout the Boris Johnson government, latterly in the cabinet. But you've kind of got your fingers dipped in the Johnson blood, and you're clearly, I mean, you just called him your friend, you clearly still have a lot of time for him. A lot of people, though, are going to want to know, well, what's going to be different if Nadhim Zahawi becomes Prime Minister? What kind of Prime Minister is he going to be? How can he restore the trust and integrity in politics, which people feel has gone?
Well, I would say, first of all, this administration is worth reminding listeners and viewers, delivered Brexit, delivered the most successful vaccination program.
It hasn't, because of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
But actually, even on that, we are delivering, and Brandon Lewis, who's chairing my campaign, is very much in charge of that and focused on that, and I'm certain he'll deliver the protocol bill, and I hope we will get to a very, very quick settlement.
So, I mean, you're already appointing the Foreign Secretary?
No, I'm saying to you that I wouldn't be as presumptuous as that or take anything for granted at this stage. I am one of 8. I hope I will have the confidence of my parliamentary party tomorrow and the next day until we get down to the final 2, and then the confidence of our great membership of this great party.
Okay,
to
but
be
what's going to be different? You've got sort of fine campaign pledges.
Yes.
Very Tony Blair, by the way.
Well, I don't know about that, but one, I do think we need to look at how we can cut taxes to help with the cost of living. I've made a pledge that I will bring forward the reduction in the basic rate of income tax, the 19p, to next year, and then go further with a further reduction the year after to 18p in the basic rate. I want to see the corporation tax rate not go to 25%, but actually remain where it is today at 19%. Why? Because the one tax that investors can compare globally, that and investors make decisions over the long term, is corporation tax, which is why it's so important. I want to lower energy bills and provide energy security because, yes, of course, we have to meet our target for net zero by 2050. COP26 was a huge triumph for Alok Sharma. Only about a third of countries had committed to net zero by 2050. By the end of COP26 in Glasgow, it was 90%. But we're in a difficult place, so I will pause VAT and, of course, the green levies on energy bills for 2 years.
You're still committed to net zero?
Of course, absolutely. In terms of what is happening on our continent, there is war raging on our continent. It's not something that many people had anticipated. So therefore, I know we have to make that investment that Ben Wallace wants, the 2.5% of GDP that we need to get into the Ministry of Defence, raising that budget by 2025, not the end of the decade, by 2025 to 57 billion. That is my third pledge. My fourth pledge is to really be a partner with business. And we're already going to do that because we want to see businesses really flourish and take advantage of some of the removal of the bureaucracy that came from the EU. So I'm going to have a review led by business for business of how we remove that bureaucracy that we inherited from the EU, because of course we took on all EU law into our
Why hasn't that been done before?
Well, we're going to sweep it away. Under a Zahawi administration, we will sweep that away. And the final pledge is we have to get tough to making sure more criminals are put away. The police are doing a great job, 13,500 more police officers. Priti Patel's done a phenomenal job, but it's no good arresting criminals and cyber criminals, because if the court system is plugged, is not working properly, we can't get those people behind bars, and therefore I will make sure that we invest in the court system and the legal services, and of course the criminal bar to clear the court backlog, £350 million of investment, and I would focus the police on violent crime and fraud, and that is my pledge. The 5 pledges that I make to the nation.
There are some fairly juicy tax cuts there, and there seems to be a bit of a bidding war on tax cuts, but very few of you are outlining how they're going to be paid for. Now, you've talked about a 20% cut in government spending. Can you just explain exactly what that means? Does that mean a 20% reduction in sort of central government department budgets, or does it mean literally a 20% cut in all government spending across the board?
So when I was Secretary of State for Education, and I pride myself, whether I was Vaccines or Education or now Chancellor, is I will always be evidence-led. And all my pledges are fully costed, and I'll be saying more about them in the coming days and publishing that as to how we're going to pay for those pledges I've just made, because we've got to bear down on inflation. We have to be fiscally disciplined. We've got the public sector pay review bodies have reported in, and I've got to get that settlement in place because we need to be disciplined.
So you accept that big tax cuts can be inflationary?
Well, no. What I'm saying to you is if we are fiscally disciplined, we can bear down on inflation. If, for example, the public sector pay review bodies and the work on public sector pay is fair, and we come together because this is an economic national emergency, then we can put a downward pressure on inflation, and that's the right thing to do. But, and here's the important thing, Ian, not only are my pledges fully costed, but also you asked about the 20%. So when I was Secretary of State for Education, I was asked by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor then to look at my department to see whether I can reduce the headcount by 20%. It was really challenging work. We had to do it in about a fortnight, but we did that work. We submitted that to Number 10 and to the Treasury. Why is that the right thing? Because we had to focus on our priorities: skills, schools, families. Look at our manifesto pledges. Can we deliver those with a reduction in headcount in a department that has 8,400 people in it? And we managed to get close to that 20%. So what I was saying is if we can look at reduction in headcount across government, because you'll remember the Prime Minister saying we've got 91,000 more people working.
We're not talking about a 20% reduction in people who work in the NHS. You're talking about a 20% reduction of people who work in government departments.
In government's departments.
Because that wasn't clear from your initial explanation,
which, if it wasn't clear, I apologise, but that is what I was talking about. That in itself also has a dampening effect on inflation, of course, because when you cut the cost of government, and as I say, everything that I am pledging is fully costed, and I'll be saying more about it in the coming days. We've only had about 24 hours to sort of 48 hours to get going, but it is fully costed. And I will publish.
It's time for your questions. We'll go to a break in a moment, but if you'd like to ask Nadhim Zahawi a question, the number to call 0345 6060 973, and you can text your question to 84850. It's 18 minutes past 7.
This is LBC. Vale on LBC.
It's 90 minutes past 7. Penny Morden will be joining us in about 10 or 15 minutes' time. We have Nadhim Zahawi with us, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, one of the 8, I'm going to say, final contestants. Let's make it X-Factory, shall we? Make it a bit exciting. Who've submitted their nomination papers today. They've got enough people who've nominated them to be going to the first ballot tomorrow, and that is the first vote will be held tomorrow afternoon. So we'll see who survives that one. Nadhim, are you ready for the calls? Let's go to Steve in Marlborough. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Nadhim. Hello, Ian. Nadhim, sorry. My question is this. I'm a long-term Tory voter. I run a small business. My big concern at the moment, like most people, is probably inflation. Several of the candidates, including yourself, have talked about tax cuts. We've seen interest rates kept artificially low, in my opinion, for the last 3 or 4 years. Inflation is out of control. It's going to be 11% in the next few months. We've seen quantitative easing, the Bank of England printing money for several years. My biggest fear is the rate of inflation at the moment. And by cutting tax, which I think is just a vote winner or just a platitude to make people feel good.
I need you to get to your question, Steve.
Yeah, what's the point in tax cuts if we're going to see increase in inflation? I just don't see the point.
Steve, you're absolutely right. What we have to do is make sure we bear down on inflation. And the first conversation I had when I got to Treasury is with the Governor of the Bank of England. And I think the Governor of the Bank of England has spoken publicly about the responsibility that we have to bear down on inflation. Because if we don't, not only does the debt servicing that the government has to deliver, which at the moment is forecast to be about 83 billion, it was only 20 billion last year, becomes even bigger. But also, as you quite rightly point out, that inflation hurts exactly the people that we're trying to help. Last week we took 2 million people, lowest paid 2 million people, out of tax altogether because of the national insurance threshold rising to £12,250. So we have to bear down on inflation. So when I talk about, for example, taking headcount and reducing the cost of departments in government, that does have a bearing on inflation in a good way, i.e. brings down inflation. When I talk about discipline, when it comes to public sector pay, which is why the pay review bodies work, and what I will be saying more about this in the coming days, is so important, because we all have to work together to control inflation, because if we don't, as I say, it's hugely harmful.
What I think
now,
Steve means...
I will not do anything without evidencing it and without costing it. That's my point to Ian earlier about my pledges.
But if you bring the income tax cut forward and then have another income tax the next year, we all have more money in our pockets, therefore we go and spend it. That therefore, I think my economics are sound here, that therefore would tend to increase inflation. So is it really a good idea to bring forward these tax rises? You can still say, look, I'm a low tax Tory, yes, I believe in low taxes, but only when it's prudent to do so.
So look at what I've said, right? I'm bringing that in next year instead of 2024, so I'm bringing it forward. But look at where the forecast for inflation is for next year. It will begin to abate by first quarter of next year, and therefore I think it's right to then bring it forward. That's about understanding and holding risk, right? What I'm saying to you is I will evidence it, and I will publish it, and I'll explain how I can do that. I'm not doing it right now, where inflation, to Steve's point, is high. This is the time where I have to say to all public sector workers, teachers, nurses, everyone else, right, here is the pay review bodies. We have to be disciplined about pay,
but if
because
rumour
that
is
also
to be
helps.
believed,
that's how I bring inflation down, Ian.
If rumour is to be believed, the speech that you would have been delivering this week, had things gone rather differently last week, would have included a VAT cut, which would also be inflationary. Don't
believe the rumours. That's what I would say to you. I am now a candidate, and I'm giving you my pledges. They're very clear. It is for next year that the 19p.
Okay, well that is clear. Steve, thank you for that. Let's go to Uzma, who's in Blackburn. Uzma, hello. What would you like to ask?
Hello, Ian. Hello, Nadhim. I want to ask a question, and I will ring and ask all your candidates that were in the cabinet the same question. It's about integrity. Owen Paterson, the parties, Dominic Cummings, Chris Pincher, you all discovered you were the leadership team, to use your quote from earlier. So how can any of you that were in that cabinet now stand for leader when you actually defended that whole appalling behaviour that's gone on for the last 2 years? And a good leadership is that you don't defend it, you stand up and you be counted. And integrity, when Boris is about to fall and everybody starts resigning, is not integrity, is it?
It's a fair question, isn't it?
Osma, you're right when you say that when you make a mistake, you should be able to put your hand up and apologise and recognise that. And I think the Chris Pincher affair was something that was a huge error of judgment. The Prime Minister apologised for that.
Were you aware of the rumours about him?
So,
and his record?
I said this on the record at the time. Is there were rumours and there were allegations about Chris Pincher when Theresa May was Prime Minister that were investigated. There was nothing substantiated and found. So she appointed him as a minister. He carried on as a minister. The specific rumours I wasn't aware of that happened. I tell you what I would do if I was Prime Minister. In any organisation, I would want to bring the best quality human resource, i.e. how we train and run an organisation full of brilliant, talented people who were made ministers. I would want to bring from the private sector, look at which organisations do this really well and do a review with the private consultancy that really understands how does this work?
So you mean to try and root these people out before they ever get elected?
Because what we need is a ministerial team and a government that acts always with integrity and is professional, and that everybody working for those ministers in government knows that they can always make a complaint. It's always transparent, that it's always, or let me put it the other way, that it's never acceptable that somebody abuses their position of power with staff or with other...
Can you give Uzma a commitment that if you become leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister, that Chris Pincher will never be allowed back in the Conservative Parliamentary Party?
Well, he's had the whip withdrawn from him, and there is now a formal investigation by the parliamentary authorities, and I think it's only right that due process is followed. And let's see what that investigation delivers at the end of the day. But Boris Johnson withdrew the whip immediately as soon as he was made aware of the specific allegations that took place with Chris Pincher. I think that's the right thing to do. Due process is important. But my point being, I think we need much better quality training for preparing people for that responsibility of ministerial office, and that's equally important.
Uzma, thank you very much. Let's go to Kundan, who is in Canterbury. Kundan, what would you like to ask?
Good evening, Nadhim. Pleasure speaking to you, sir. I'm a landlord based in Kent, and I own a number of residential and commercial properties in Kent. Now, over the last 5 to 10 years, the government has consistently pushed landlords to a corner, as I'm sure you would have noticed with the introduction of Section 24, the removal of Section 21, and with a number of other changes in law. And given the fact that you and your family are also landlords, I'm sure you would empathize with the fact that landlords are a lifeblood of the private rental sector. What is your policy, and what would you do to bring back landlords, the massive exodus of landlords that has been seen, essentially the small-time landlords, the people who own 1 and 2 properties that have been leaving the market, leading to more homelessness.
Okay, Nadhim?
Kundan, it's just worth reminding listeners that when I was made minister under Theresa May and then under Boris Johnson, obviously I have nothing to do with my family business or properties, and I think that's the right thing in our system. That's the correct thing to do. Look, I'm not going to flannel you here, Kundan, and say things. Yes, of course, but I think it's important that we get this balance right. I think protection for tenants and, of course, encouraging investment in the UK has to be a priority. But I'm not going to make policy on the hoof, contender. So I apologise. I hope you're not too disappointed with that answer.
Let's make it more. Well, I think you will be, but let's make it more general, because I think there are a lot of groups in society who regard themselves as natural Tory voters who have felt under attack from a Conservative government, going back to the days of when George Osborne was Chancellor. And I think small private sector landlords are one group, but there are plenty of others. I mentioned the loan charge to you earlier before we came in the studio. There are lots of natural Conservatives who feel totally alienated by a Conservative government. What are you going to do to get those people back, natural Conservatives?
So my pledge, as I did in the Department of Education, focus skills, schools, families, and be able to articulate that. I think we have slightly lost our way, or there's a feeling of listlessness in government. Is that colleagues return on a Friday from Parliament to their constituents. They, as small businesses, whether it's landlords or other businesses, couldn't really describe what is our economic strategy. Where is the direction of travel from this government? Yes, the government did well through the pandemic, and furlough, to Rishi's credit, was a brilliant scheme protecting people's livelihoods and of course, jobs. That was really, really clear. I think since then, we've not really articulated what is a Conservative economic strategy. And what I will do, if I am elected as leader of the party and Prime Minister, is be able to, I hope, return on this programme and explain to people, this is what my economic strategy is. I've tried to highlight a little bit of it today with my pledges: cut taxes to reduce the cost of living, lower energy bills to provide energy security. That's important to, of course, both businesses and to homes. Increase defence spending, that's equally important. Well, and be a partner to business. That is critical. If you look at my pledges, it is about being a partner to business, because actually the way we boost jobs and regenerate our regions, we must be the best place in the world to do business and to invest. And I will launch a fundamental review led by business for business, sweeping away that sort of legacy of European
certainly
bureaucracy.
Taking that as a commitment that if you become Prime Minister, you'll come on this programme every week. So, right.
I don't think I made that promise.
Let's do some quick-fire questions to end up with. Yes or no answers. Scrap that online harms bill.
No, because I think it is important that we protect children. I was children and families minister. I saw the damage some of the stuff online does to
Scrap the BBC licence fee.
No, I think it's important that we look at how, in future, the BBC funds itself in a world that is completely transformed when the BBC was launched.
Scrap Channel 4 privatisation.
Well, I think it's important that we look at Channel 4 as a great asset. And, of course, I was the chair of the all-party group for Channel 4, but I would certainly want to make sure that we continue to liberate Channel 4, because Channel 4 tell me that their new model, their streaming model, is working and is incredibly dynamic and profitable. If it is, then let's liberate them to go out there and be able to raise money on international markets and grow and take on some of the global companies.
These answers are a little bit long. Restore DFID as a separate department.
I think actually where we've got to now is the right thing. We've got 2 years to deliver, and if we're going to focus on delivery, I don't want to be distracted by organisational changes in government.
Your worst mistake?
My goodness. My worst ever mistake is probably being a workaholic and not seeing enough of my family.
If you come second in this contest, will you guarantee to Tory party members that you won't withdraw?
Yes, I will.
Say something nice about Keir Starmer.
He's a decent man.
What's your karaoke song of choice?
I Will Survive.
And who's your sporting hero?
My goodness. This week, definitely Mo Farah. What a man.
What a story.
What a story.
Nadhim Zahawi, thank you very much for joining us for the last half an hour on LBC. Coming up in a couple of minutes, we'll be joined by Penny Mordaunt, one of the other leadership contenders. So we'll take your calls for her, 0345 6060 973. It's 7:34 news time with Amelia Cox.
Tory leadership candidate Nadhim Zahawi has told LBC he put country before party by calling for Boris Johnson's resignation last week. The Chancellor's letter, which came 24 hours after he was promoted, is thought to have been the final straw for the Prime Minister. He is one of the 8 remaining candidates who are through to the next round of the contest. Reporters found child sexual exploitation thriving